Hi guys and welcome back. Today we are talking about the Moondrop's entry into a new segment of headphones. Those are the over-the-head big headphones, big cans. And we have two models. The more affordable one, Moondrop Void, here, and the more expensive one, Moondrop Venus. Venus is 600 US dollars, Void is 200 US dollars. So let's start with the bad news first and talk about Moondrop Void. So Moondrop released the Void model and got some mixed impressions from the first adopters. And that was the first version of these headphones that I'm holding right now, right here. And the second revised version came quickly after that. And thanks to really kind guys from Shenzhen Audio, I have both of these right here. So I was able to compare them and see what are the differences. So Void is built, it's very lightweight, it looks nice, it has comfy cushions, but it feels very plasticky. And the fit is kinda, I don't know how to say this, but it's a little bit loose. As you can see, there is no good clamping force, especially on the lower part of the headphone. And guys, I have quite big head. So I'm not really sure for those of you with smaller heads and smaller ears, would this be improved or maybe even worse? But for me, it's quite a good fit, it's quite a good comfort, and their being lightweight really helps that. But the feeling is definitely that these feel plasticky. And this first version especially added to this with this sort of sound when you do this. Because just plastic hitting on plastic had this plasticky clanky feel. The revised version, now the one that you can buy right now on Shenzhen Audio or other stores, added some rubber padding there, so it's a little bit nicer sound. But overall build quality and materials are exactly the same as the first version. So what did change? Well, tuning changed slightly. The first one had a kind of brighter, mid-range forward kind of tuning. And it sounded lively, but maybe a little bit bright for somebody's taste. But the revised one is a little bit darker and tamer in the mid-range, especially upper mid-range and highs. It's kind of toned down, laid back in those regions, but the bass line and the mid-bass are a little bit more emphasized. So in general, it's a more bassy and more bold tuning, but I have to say here that I actually preferred the original version. That doesn't mean anything really, because just by using EQ, you can add a little bit of bass to the first version or deduct it from the second one and pump up a little bit of the mid-range, upper mid-range section. And that would make both of these sound like 99% the same. So knowing that, I'll remove this original version that you cannot buy anymore from the view, and let's talk about Moondrop Void and how does it actually sound. Well, first thing to notice is that they're quite sensitive and you can drive them with basically anything. I had pretty good results with several desktop DACs/headphone amps, but I also had pretty great results with portable dongles, such as great Shanling UA5 or Moondrop's own Moonriver 2. That's a great product, by the way. Yeah, these are mobile friendly. They're lightweight, they're easily driven, and they do sound lively even with lower powered DACs/amps. Tonality is quite well judged, so no matter what kind of DAC you're using, is it a little bit darker and bassier, it will not sound too dark and too bassy with these headphones. That's, by the way, the situation with Shanling UA5 here. This is a little bit bassier, mid-range laid back kind of DAC. And it sounds like that with these headphones. If you hook them up to something brighter and more forward, like Earman Angel, for example, that I reviewed recently, these will sound more open, more dynamic, more engaging because that one has more power, reveals more details. But important thing to know is that Void is not picky and choosy when it comes to the source. What didn't impress me that much is the sound staging, which is like just average or maybe a little bit below average in terms of width and feeling of depth. It's a little bit cramped around your head. But good thing that inside of that soundstage, that's not impressively big and spacious, everything is layered nicely and separated nicely. As I said, tones are clear and there's nothing that seems too problematic or negative in any way. So I've decided to compare these to a few other headphones. I did that by using a very affordable Takstar Pro 82. These are one of the headphones that was one of my first videos on this channel, I suppose. These go for $65 nowadays, and these are a true overachiever when it comes to their sound fidelity. But I also compared it to something much more price appropriate, like hifi's HE4XX, that still can be found for some $180, $189, something like that on Drop. And in there lies a problem. Moondrop Void is closer to Takstar Pro 82 than it is to hifi's. So let me explain. Takstar Pro 82 sounds detailed, it's a little bit thinner and brighter sounding, and dynamically flat. So yeah, actually Void does sound better. It's more, a little bit more 3D and a little bit more palpable when it comes to tones, how we perceive them. They have more fullness. But the overall sound staging is similarly sized. It's equally wide and not deeper really. So when it comes to the sound staging and its spaciousness, these two are quite comparable. When it comes to detail retrieval, these two are again quite comparable. But Moondrop Void does sound a little bit livelier and more dynamic and fuller in tone. And yeah, that makes Void a better headphones. But then I take hifi's HE4XX, and first thing that I noticed is that these are much less sensitive. You have to crank up the volume much higher on your amp. And if you're using a portable DAC amp, like this Shanling UA5, you'll quickly run out of juice. Especially with some songs that are recorded to be a little bit more silent. But once you provide them with that, these hifi's sound richer and more spacious, richer with details and richer with tone timbre. Vocals are just fuller, they have more texture. You can hear small nuances in both male and female vocals, and they feel more realistic, more lifelike, bigger, and I already said soundstage is wider and airier with hifi's than it is with Voids. And it sounds like a pretty decent step up from the Void. And that's the problem. Void is a $199 headphone. And this one is $189 headphone that was released few years ago. And Takstar Pro 82 is a $65 headphone that was released again several years ago. And Void, in its performance, is probably closer to Takstar Pro 82 than it is to hifi's. If this was a model that costs $99 US, this review would sound completely different. I would say that these are well balanced, quite sensitive, portable friendly. They sound a little bit better than 65 competitor, and they also feel a little bit better in terms of quality, but not by much. Both of these are similarly plasticky. But Void's slightly cleaner tone and slightly fuller sound would be like, oh yeah, I would be happy to pay $99 for these. I cannot recommend Void for $199. Either I can say that these are a good headphones for $99 that are currently overpriced, or I can say that these are not that good headphones at $199. So whichever approach you take, with their current pricing, in my opinion, Void is not a good option that I could recommend to my viewers. I would say go for hifi, or yeah, sometimes in the future, if these get a considerable price cut, then it's a different story. For something around $100 US, I would be happy to recommend them. But at this price point, no. But let's move to the more expensive model that is actually a better news, and that's the Moondrop Venus. Starting from the build itself, these are like almost completely aluminum made. The head, this is not a headband, I forgot the name of this one. You know, English is not my native language. Please write down in the comments how would you call this one. But that, whatever it is made out of metal, and everything silvery that you see here is made out of aluminum. This mesh here has slightly rough workmanship, and the etching of these cutouts is a little bit sharp, but they're thin and you cannot cut yourself or hurt yourself in any way, but just you'll notice that it's a little bit rough and raw. And that's okay, it just shows you that these are not your end of the line 3000 or I don't know how many thousands of dollars are the high-end headphones these days. It's getting higher and higher and higher every year. Back in my time, I sound like an old grandpa, like high-end headphones were Sennheiser HD 800s. And those were like $800 or $600, something like that. Now we take $600 headphones, and like YouTubers say it's like lower mid-range, whereas upper mid-range is something around 1500s. And like flagship high-end or something like that is several $1,000s. Okay, back to the Moondrop. So Void is a properly built, nice looking headphone with a really nice feel, and it's not lightweight with all this metal, but it's not particularly heavy either in my opinion. I didn't weigh them, but when I put them, I like the comfort. These are big headphones, and this, yeah, pads, cushions are really big and circular. They're probably bigger than anything that I've ever had previously. Clamping force is not big. I really like that because I have huge ears protruding on the sides, and everything that clamps hard hurts my ears quite a bit, especially after prolonged use. But Venus here is really comfy and cozy for me, and I've used these to edit some of my previous videos, and those edits can last 4 or 5 hours, and I felt like nice and breezy around the ears. So yeah, for comfort and build quality, these rank really highly in my opinion. One thing that you should know though is that these are low in sensitivity. So you need to have high powered amp if you want to listen to them loudly. And it's not only about loudness, it's about getting the desired volume level. Because in some modern songs, like pop songs, where recording level is really high, close to 0 dB, and everything on that track is compressed, so the whole track is in the range of -6 dB to 0 dB. You could get really decent volume level out of these even with lower powered amps. But if you listen to some older recording, maybe classical music or something like that with high dynamic range, meaning that the average recording of that track may be at -12 or -20 dB, so you have more dynamic headroom when something loud actually happens to go to that 0 dB limit, hard limit. You will not have sufficient power with low powered devices, portable devices, don't even think about that, to actually have realistically loud volumes out of those classical recordings. You need high gain in those cases to get these to sound loud. But once you do that, how do they actually sound? Well, they sound quite open and breezy. If I had to use just one word to describe the sound of Venus, I would say breezy. The second word would be open. And these two might be synonyms when we are talking about the sound. But these sound very open, and the sound itself feels like a lightweight type of sound. The sound stage is quite open and decluttered. Everything is spread quite nicely, wide and deep, and around your head, not in your head. And the separation is really good. Every instrument is separated well from the other one. And then when a main tone happens, it feels like there's empty space around that tone. Even more so, the tonality of these headphones is tilted towards higher registers. And that also makes it feel lightweight. Fortunately, these do not have some annoying sort of attacky forward sharpness to them, because if that was the part of the sound, it would be painful, but it's not. They have like a calm and relaxing approach to transients and just edges. Everything is clear and crisp, but it's not too attacky, so that also relaxes you. And then you add this wide open and breezy feeling, and it really feels like a well-lit sound that's not overly aggressive or annoying in any way. But what about the lower registers, you ask? What about the bass? Well, the bass is quite deep and quite decently controlled, nimble and firm, but it's not emphasized in any way. I don't feel that bass is lacking, but it's just not a star of the show. If you listen to a very bassy song, for example something like this, there will be plenty of bass. You'll hear the bass line, it will sound good. Bass line is actually quite deep and weighty when it needs to be, but it's not particularly punchy. It doesn't have that kick and slam in it the way that some dynamic headphones can provide. I think dynamic drivers headphones. This one is quick, is controlled, nimble, deep when it needs to be, but it doesn't have much in terms of slam and dynamics. So I noticed that I could listen to these for a quite long period of times, enjoy discovering music on Tidal Discovery or something like that, and I wouldn't get tired. Now, if I directly compare them to something else, I notice these shortcomings, but in isolation, these sound quite good to me. But to find out their true worth, I compared them to my really favorite one at 350, Verum 1. Well, that's a Latin name, so it would probably be Verum 1. But yeah, let's pretend that everything is in English, so I'll call them Verum 1. These are also planar headphones. They're also quite a bit weighty and well built. I have them for some time now and I love their sound. It's a little bit warmer in the bass line, a little bit fuller. They're also quite comfortable, but to my opinion, not as comfortable and as breezy as Moondrop Venus here. My ears do get tired and hot much quicker with Verum 1 than they do with Venus. Tonality of Verum 1 is a little bit warmer, but detail retrieval is not completely at the level of Venus here. Venus do dig a little bit more of the tone texture, and it has slightly wider, bigger, airier soundstage, where Verum 1 feels more closed in, more in your head. So Speaking about technicalities, I find that Moondrop Venus is a better headphone. Speaking about tonality, I did prefer Verum 1 a little bit. So that made me use EQ. I wanted to know, well, if I add a little bit of baseline oomph on the Venus here, would this equalize? And I did that. I did use APO equalizer. I don't do that often, but here in this situation, no major problems. I just wanted to make sound a little bit fuller and thicker on Venus, and it worked just fine. Adding just 3 dB below 100 Hz, and if you want, you can pull down a little bit that 12 kHz peak on Venus, and you get really tonally even, tonally neutral sound here. It's still technically a little bit better, wider, airier than Verum 1, while tonally being much more comparable. So what I want to say here is that if I really try, I can make $600 headphones sound better to me than $350 headphones. That's good. That means that Moondrop didn't overprice these as they did with Void. If you pay more, you should get more. And in my opinion, Venus does bring more to the table than Verum 1. And then I took my current daily driver, Goldplanar GL2000s. I really like these. I think they sound very natural and very neutral, and they are a little bit thicker in the bass line. They're not headphones that will win you with something immediately, like, ooh, this is so sharp and dynamic and details are all over the place, but their tone timbre is great. It's better than most headphones up to $1,000 that I've ever heard. So when I compare these two directly head to head, I notice that Venus does sound a little bit wider and airier and breezier. I repeat this so much throughout this review. And also, Venus 1, at least for me, are again more comfortable ones. But Goldplanars are no slouch on that regard. They have big comfy cushions. They're also quite comfortable. I have no, but maybe ears do get a little bit hotter, a little bit easier with these than with Venus. I don't know why is that, but I really simply love Venus and their comfort. But going back to the sound differences, as I said, Venus here sounds slightly wider, slightly airier. It's also a little bit thinner in terms of just tonality, whereas Goldplanar sound bolder, especially in the bass line and mid-bass. Venus is a mid-range forward type of headphones, and it really brings out the details, and especially like string instruments, cymbals, things like that sound really present with these, but also slightly more metallic. While with Goldplanars, those metallic tones, those strings, cymbals, things like that, are more laid back. But there is something, especially with acoustic instruments, and for example, I was listening to this great jazz song, and this is a great live recording, I absolutely love it. When there's a saxophone playing somewhere roughly in the beginning of that song, Goldplanars just sound more realistic. With them, there's more of that, like the air is going through the instrument, more of that feeling, while Venus here makes that instrument, a saxophone, sound a little bit more high-pitched, squeaky, more like woo. And believe it or not, no amount of EQing can make Venus present saxophone in a such realistic way that Goldplanars can. But also, no amount of EQing can make Goldplanars sound as nimble and quick and just airy and wide as Venus here. But all in all, generally speaking, I find that tone timbre is richer and more natural to Goldplanars. Some of you might prefer Venus here, but to my ears, they do have their qualities, but the tone itself is a little bit simpler. It's like artificially cleaned to sound really good, really well separated with empty space around it, whereas these have a little bit more complexity and texture and timbre to their tone. And because of that, I still prefer Goldplanars, especially with acoustic songs and vocals. Venus just slotted in between Verum and Goldplanars. So when two really great models are setting that price to performance ratio line, and Venus fits on that line somewhere in between, that means that its own price to performance ratio is also really good, especially if you consider that it's their first headphone model that they've released, together with Void, of course. So to end today's video and this review, Venus, even though they're more expensive, they justify their price. This is a good headphone, well built, really comfortable, with good sound quality. They have their own tonality. I've explained it already. If that's okay with you, they're pretty good choice. They also react quite good to EQ. Void, on the other hand, feels slightly cheaper than they are. They sound slightly cheaper than they are. There are better options than Void at the same price level. So that would be it for today, guys. Thanks to Shenzhen Audio, I was able to test not one but two versions of Void. I was able to speak my mind honestly and share my impressions to you. So if you are maybe buying anything hi-fi related, I linked Shenzhen Audio store. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, bye.